Welcome back on the AM show as we get into our first big story. And President Akakpo just yesterday terminated the appointment of Charles Boahen, Minister of Finance at the presidency. And it has raised quite the stir among people. It is on the back of that latest ANAS expose, Galamsey economy. There are so many matters arising, but we get into the substantive issues with our guests this morning, who will be joining us at talk on these matters. Vitus Azim is an anti-corruption campaigner. We have lawyer Martin Pebu and Bobby Banson, also a lawyer, joining us for this conversation. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. All right, so we'll start with Vitus Azim, an anti-graft campaigner who joins the conversation on phone. Vitus, if you can hear me, a very good morning to you, sir.
I can hear you.
Great. Just to kickstart the conversation, there have been calls for the sacking of Ken Ofori-Atta, Charles Boahen, among others. And now this has come up, basically forcing the hand of the system, the powers that be. What is your reaction to this dismissal, even before we get into what led to the dismissal? What is your reaction to it?
Well, I think this termination is not for the same reason that people were calling for his removal. People were calling for his removal and the removal of his boss because of the mess that we find ourselves in.
Right.
But this is a different thing, probably because of impersonation.
I mean, the end...
Influence peddling.
The result is the same, isn't it?
Possible impersonation and the influence peddling.
Mr. Azim,
this is a different matter.
I posed that question to you because the result, the end, is the same, isn't it?
I'm not getting you well.
What people wanted, whether he goes for this matter, which borders on, corruption in a way, or failure to actually be the best or deliver the best to the country in terms of being a finance minister, either way, he is no longer at post. That's what I meant.
Yeah, but if you read the letter that the president wrote to him, he was thanking him for his strong performance. So it is not because of the performance at the Ministry of Finance or poor performance at the Ministry of Finance that he is removed. So this does not satisfy those of us or those people that were calling for their removal. And in any case, removing him without removing the finance minister doesn't still solve that issue. Because he was working under the Minister of Finance. And so if he is removed and the Minister of Finance himself is still at post, I don't think that the president has been able to satisfy most Ghanaians.
So in other words, you still take exception to what has happened because it was not on the back of what you would term the abysmal performance of him and his counterpart, Ken Ofori-Atta, because this came up, and you feel hard done by that?
Yeah, I feel that this has not met our expectations. You see, there is a reason why he has been removed. The reason is not because of his poor performance at the Minister of Finance.
Right.
And if that was the reason, then the Minister of Finance himself would have also gone. But the president has continuously said the Minister of Finance is doing a good job and all that. And even in the letter to Mr. Boahen, the president thanked him for his strong performance. So it is a different matter. And I even think that the vice president could have taken the matter to court. If he's not satisfied, he should treat it as a personal matter, in addition to his removal.
Let me ask you, how do you, I mean, these are your initial thoughts. We're not getting into a full-scale conversation yet, but how do you react to the response of the vice president? He comes out forcefully to say he doesn't have any ties to this situation, though his name has been mentioned by a minister of state, and that his integrity is paramount to him, that he wouldn't do anything to compromise it. We've heard from Dr. Gideon Boahen, who also speaks for the vice president, saying that the vice president he knows doesn't do this, doesn't engage in such activities, and that it would be unheard of for him to do such a thing. How do you react to that? Some have said that it's an apt response that the vice president put out on social media and through the sacking of Charles Edu Boahen. Was it that apt for you?
Well, I think that it's normal for that action, the response to have been made. Now, whether it is a good response or it's a bad response would depend on whether the vice president is able to completely exonerate himself from those allegations from the accusations that are made against Charles Edu Boahen. This is his word against what the vice president has said.
Right.
You and I were not there. We don't know whether that conversation actually took place and whether any money passed through Charles Edu Boahen to the vice president or not. For now, we cannot tell. But anybody that is accused of something usually will come out and deny. Even sometimes when you are aware, you still come and say you are not aware until you get further information. So for now, it was a good response, but it's difficult for us to say to believe or not to believe what he said. But he couldn't have just kept quiet. As for the termination, we cannot even be sure of what will come as a result of the termination or the reason for the termination. Is it because he's dragged the name of the vice president into the mud? Or is it because there's likely to be further names coming up that they don't want revealed? Is it are they pulling the ear of the Charles Edu Boahen to ensure to bring him to rein him to make sure that he does not go astray or what? We don't yet know for that.
Tell me quickly before I go to Bobby Banson, who is a lawyer, do you find it a matter of concern that in number 12, which pointed to, in fact, I believe the biggest casualty in number 12 was Kwesi Nyantakyi, former boss of the GFA. Interestingly, the names of the vice president and the president were mentioned. And this person even suggested that they were in his pocket. In this instance, it comes up again, maybe not so forcefully on the standpoint of the president, but more on the standpoint of the vice president. Do you find it a concern, whether for the sake of reality or perception, that the two crucial figures of our country, the CEO and the deputy CEO, aka the president and the vice president, keep having their names mentioned in this light? First, by a GFA boss, and now by a minister of state. How concerned are you?
It is a serious concern, and it is worrying for two things. Either it gives the impression that this actually happens, that the people actually stand to benefit, those two people stand to benefit, and that what is being said may have some truth in it, which is the negative part of it. Or the positive side is that some people are using their names for personal gain.
Right.
Either way, there's concern for it, that if people can use our vice president and the president's name for personal benefit, it's a worry. But the other side is a more worrying part, that if it's true that this is what actually happens, that the people are benefiting, the two individuals are benefiting, that is a more serious worry, because they are the highest people in this country, and you don't expect that to be the case in this country. It's giving a bad name, not only to them, but to the country as a whole. And it is a worry. It has to do with investors and all that. It's a very serious case.
Do hold for me, Mr. Azim. Let me bring in Bobby Banson, a lawyer. Bobby, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. I think you may have to unmute Bobby Banson.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Great.
And
it's been a while. I hope you've been keeping well.
Yes, I have been. We've all been managing ourselves since the economic situation spiraled out of control.
I see. It's hitting you too, eh?
Like they say, go catch everybody.
You catch everybody, are you? We pray for better times so we all can live better. But on this development, I'd like to start from your general view of, I don't know, have you seen this latest documentary?
I have.
Bobby, I'm losing you. The sound is not so clear.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Is
yes,
it better?
Go ahead.
Okay. I have read the statements that have been put out by Tiger Eye, but I have not watched the documentary myself. I believe the statement is more or less a summary of what was captured in the videos, and the timing is very relevant. We must put it in that context. But it doesn't also take away the fact that there has been allegations of things like this. For me, the reaction by the presidency is quite unique. Let me put it that way, because we are aware it is not the first time. It is not the first time that Tiger Eye has come up with such an allegation or expose, as it were, against members of the government. In some instances, you would have situations where the presidency has said that they have looked at the allegations, they do not find any basis in it, and then will not proceed or take any steps on it. In other instances, you'll find that the president said they have directed the matter to the CID, and the CID has come up to say after investigations, they do not find any person capable. I'm talking about the Galamsey issues and the special committee, as it were, established at the presidency for that, and the allegations of bribery that came with it. But with this particular instance, the action by the presidency was very swift. You would ask yourself whether or not the presidency is convinced with this work to say that with this one, he's very sure that it actually happened or not. So the reaction by the presidency is one that has not followed the normal course of reaction by the president when it comes to such allegations of bribery or corruption or influence peddling against members of his government.
Now, mention has been made, before we backtrack, mention has been made of the timing. You heard Vitus say that for him, the value may be the same in terms of what some of them wanted, that Ken Ofori-Atta and Charles Adu Boahen are not performing, for which reason they should be sacked. But in this instance, his problem has to do with the fact that they were not sacked, or at least he, Charles Adu Boahen, has not been sacked because of failing to do the right thing for our economy, but he's been sacked because of something corruption related. Do you share that opinion?
Well, I get where Mr. Vitus is coming from, but for me, I think that the fact that he was sacked, I mean, the president had made it obvious that he wasn't going to sack them based on the agitations by the civil society mainly, saying that they have failed to perform. And so if this has given the president the opportunity to sack him, I believe that this is a worse reason, for lack of a better word, to sack a minister. Because mind you, this publication dents his credibility everywhere he goes as somebody who has been sacked by his appointing authority on allegations of bribery and corruption. More or less, if he's not careful, it will not only shut his political career, but his private career as well. Before he got into politics, he had a very thriving private business. Now that this has happened, I think that it will have more impact on his private business than if he was sacked by the president for non-performance. So even though he wasn't sacked on the grounds that a lot of members of civil society or the general populace wanted him to, I believe that if you look at the impact that this would have on his career as a politician or his career as a private person, I believe this is worse. This is worse.
And so, well, the president's hand may have been forced. Let's talk about, you made mention of whether this actually happened. We don't know the full detail, but from what you gather, from all the talk about $200,000 for the vice president, the shopping money that he received, and the appearance fee, and the talk about eventually $500 million if you're going to make this investment coming to the banking sector, and 20% of a cut for me. Legally speaking, does that suffice? Because again, we're faced with a situation where people are saying this is sheer or mere entrapment. How do we disentangle this legally?
Well, I have always maintained that there are legal problems with what has become known as the ANAS method. You see, criminal prosecution thrives on evidence, admissible evidence. there must be a complaint lodged by a person. The person who lodges the complaint must be able to give evidence in court and must subject himself to cross-examination by the suspects or lawyers for the suspects. Now, you ask yourself whether or not, in all these matters that Anas or Tiger Eye has been able to come up with, how many of them have ended up going through criminal prosecution based on those evidence alone? Apart from the persons who have been affected saying they are resigning on their own and then suing Tiger Eye for whatever legal remedies that they may be. And I do not see this situation being different. So yes, Tiger Eye has put it out there. The president's reaction, it's maybe to make sure that the perception is not there that he is actually condoning some of these things. But as to whether or not it will be a basis for a criminal prosecution, I have my own doubts in terms of the technicalities. We may say that yes, the perception is there. That I believe is what will affect the integrity of all these persons that have been affected. I do not think that the defense of entrapment would take away the perception. You see, if you do not have that, what is the word? That inclination in you, it will be difficult for somebody to entrap you. And mind you, if you look at it or if you read this particular instance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of Finance was also offered a gift, for lack of a better word, right? His PA was also offered a gift, but the two of them from the expose refused it. In the expose concerning the judges, some judges were on record to have refused the gifts, and their names were mentioned in the expose. So if you go and you receive the gift, then you come back or bribe or whatever it is, you come back and say, I was entrapped. Do you need to be entrapped before you would know that you have an obligation first to your conscience, to yourself, to your family, and more importantly to the state, not to engage in any acts that would have criminal consequences? You do not need somebody to trap you. If you have sworn an oath as a minister or as a civil servant or as a public servant or as anybody that is in public office to make sure that you discharge your obligations in accordance with law, and somebody comes to offer you bribe to take, and you say that if the person had not offered you bribe, you would not have accepted it, and so that is a defense to you participating in the bribery, I think that it's a very shaky grounds. And so in as much as I think that there may be legal challenges if some of these recordings form the sole basis of a criminal prosecution, I also think that the defense of entrapment, as they always put out there, may not be a very solid defense.
I mean, we saw it come up with the Kwesi Nyantakyi issue and a number of, the Anas exposés. You feel that merely, calling on or falling on entrapment may not suffice, as we've already heard coming up. It may not suffice.
I think that it will be difficult, especially in the context of the fact that there are other persons that did not fall for this so-called entrapment. It's not as if, you see, I believe that the entrapment issue may suffice mostly if somebody just drops money in your account, you don't know what it is for. And later the person comes to say that, oh, you asked them to drop the money and it is for this A, B, C, D, and you did not attempt to return it. But you have instances where you actively request for these things based on somebody offering to do an investment. And you say that if the person had not come to offer the investment, you would not have put yourself in a situation where you would have asked for these things. I think that criminal liability are two things. Whether there was the mens rea, that is the intent, whether there was the actual use, and the absence of any legally strong defense. And so if you did not have the intention to have collected or engaged in that act of bribery and corruption, you would have refused it just like the other persons who were put in the same situation and also refused it. So that is my basis. I mean, it's a matter of legal interpretation or as it were. But I think that it varies depending on the circumstances of each case. Despite the fact that I have said that I think that there are also legal challenges if there's sole evidence that any state would have to prosecute criminally would be the so-called video recordings or whatever that Tiger Eye team engages in.
Tell me, does it implicate him in any way, the fact that he takes this shopping money? What exactly could be something that complicates the situation for him or makes him complicit? Is it taking the shopping money? Is it requesting this appearance fee? What exactly, from what you've read so far, what is it that could create legal problems for Charles Adu Boahen beyond his sacking?
Well, you know, for me, the questions that would have to be answered is whether or not he was contacted by these persons in his capacity as a minister of state. If the answer is yes, whether or not he conducted himself in that capacity as a minister of state to his personal benefit. If the answer is yes, whether or not he was offering these investors gains that they would not have ordinarily received in consideration of receiving money in return. If the answer is yes, then I think that there is a basis for any form of investigations by either the Special Prosecutor's Office, the Criminal Investigation Department, as it were, to find out whether he has abused his office for personal gain. So yes, there will be a basis for any such investigation. But for me, more importantly, is his reputation as an astute businessman. Because you see, once you expose yourself to public office, you open yourself up to some of these temptations, for lack of a better word. If you fall for them, they do not only follow you as a politician, they also follow you in your private businesses, especially if you're engaged in business that requires integrity. And so tomorrow, if he's out of office and his name pops up in any private engagement, anybody who wants to do due diligence on who we are engaging, the first stop will be to go to the internet, because on his CV, he cannot take away the fact that he has been Minister for Finance before. First Deputy, I think so, and then
so he's a Minister of Finance at the presidency.
At the presidency, yes, but you know, how many people would distinguish where? Once he's Minister of Finance, he's Minister of Finance.
Right.
If they start doing due diligence, the question is, how did he leave his job? And if he does not take steps to clear his name, which people have done against some of these announced exposés, if he does not take steps to clear his name, then this would be hanging on his head, God knows, until eternity. So for me, he should be concerned more on the dent that this will have on his reputation, one, as a person, as a businessman, then lastly, as a politician, than, you know, the criminal prosecution, which may suffer technical challenges. And if he's so sure that the videos have been doctored, it is not what it is, then, like others before him who have found themselves in these situations have done, then it behoves on him to take the necessary steps to clear his name.
All right. So just a quick clarity there. He is Minister of State at the Finance Ministry. I just got that clarity. Sometimes it becomes a bit fuzzy. And some of these complications also come up because we know of a finance minister. In the past, we've not had all of these at the presidency and at this and at that. But anyway, we can play around with those. But very quickly, before I go back to Vitus Azim, the vice president has responded with some ferocity that he knows nothing about this situation, that this suggests influence peddling, that his integrity is crucial to him. We've heard his spokesperson, Dr. Gideon Boahen, also say this to us here and to other, media houses as well. Are you convinced by that? And I pose that question because this wouldn't be the first time that an expose by Anas has fingers pointing to both the vice president and the president. There is a repeat in this documentary. Whether for the sake of reality or perception, what does that paint? What picture does that paint?
Well, I was I won't say happy, but I liked the reaction by the vice president. I think it was swift, it was direct, he didn't mince words. He said that if indeed the content of that footage is true, then the minister's position is not tenable, and so he should be dismissed. I mean, it's for the first time you see a member of government directly saying that another member of government who has implicated him should be dismissed. But
the point to be made is that the point to be made is that he's implicated. He is the vice president, and he's been implicated in this matter. I mean, personal interest in that instance is also crucial, isn't it?
No, but you see, what I was going to say was that beyond that statement, I am not sure what we expect from the vice president to do legally. And this is what I mean. The vice president was not there when these so-called conversations took place. Right. And so he's only a third party, just like all of us, what we have heard. He's only reacting because his name has been mentioned. Now, if he decides to lodge a complaint against Mr. Boahen, for what offense? That Mr. Boahen has engaged in corruption, or Mr. Boahen has used his name, or Mr. Boahen
to peddle influence.
Civil action has. Yes, but then he, as the vice president, will not have first-hand information of exactly what took place. So it is only Tiger Eye, and I'm talking about legally, it is only Tiger Eye operatives who were there when the so-called conversations took place, who would be able to commence or to as it were, bring any action or lodge any complaint against Mr. Boahen. For the vice president, if I sit in my house and I throw like Mr. what the expose on Mr. President did, if somebody sits in his house and say that the CEO of multimedia is in my pocket, it doesn't mean it's true. How do you expect the CEO of multimedia to sue the person for defamation if the CEO of multimedia was not sitting in that meeting? So if whoever has lost or has been defrauded, and I'm using the defraud loosely, has been defrauded by this so-called influence peddling, lodges a complaint and investigations commence, I am sure the vice president will be invited to say what he knows about his relationship with the finance minister. At that stage, if he's invited, then he will be able to come to say, I don't know him, I didn't send him, I have not received any money from him, I have not entered into any discussions relating this subject or any other similar subject. So then on that basis, the vice president will now be a witness, as it were, or somebody who is aiding in investigations. But I don't think legally the vice president can walk to the CID or the Special Prosecutor's Office to be a complainant. I believe that the appropriate complainant may be the Tiger Eye office or any other person who has first-hand information or evidence in respect of this. And if the vice president's office is invited, which I think his office should be invited, then they will say what they know about it. Beyond that, I do not see how we would expect him to be a complainant in this case or take steps directly against Mr. Boahen.
Quick final one, and because we are dissecting the legal element, some things naturally follow through. I want to do this right after this, I'll get to Mr. Azim. Just to find out, so the sacking of Boahen, we know the president has not been in town. He's been in COP27, at COP27 in Egypt and all of that. The vice president is acting as president. But even there, legally speaking, people would say that technically there are things he cannot do. Per what Eugene Ahin, the director of communications at the presidency, says, it's the president's directive, to sack Charles Boahen. There are certain scenarios that come to play. Some suggest he would have interacted with the president, though he's acting on his behalf, before taking such an action. Legally speaking, what are the dynamics as you know it?
Well, I think that we are maybe stretching the interpretation of those relevant provisions. The Supreme Court has said that the fact that the president is outside Ghana doesn't mean that he loses his authority as the president. They interpreted that when a similar situation went before them. I also think that because the vice president's name came up in the expose, it may raise certain issues in terms of perception, conflict of interest, cover up, or as it were, if he directly took the decision in respect of the fate of the Minister of Finance. I think the president has not done anything wrong by directing that the appointment be terminated. Besides, he's the appointing authority, and only him can terminate. Either he directs somebody to do that, or he does it himself.
Let me come to Vitus, and thank you so much for holding. I just had to exhaust the first batch of questions for Bobby Banton. Let me find out from you. You made mention initially when we started the conversation that the vice president would have to exonerate himself. Those were the words you used. Why exactly? If you follow what Bobby Banton has said, I mean, this just points to him as a third party. We've not seen him taking any money, unlike we saw Charles Adu Boahen do, among other things. So how exactly is the vice president complicit in all of this?
Well, I think you mentioned earlier on that this is not the first time that the vice president's name is being mentioned in connection with something like that. So what I'm saying is, what Bobby Banton said about the vice president being a complainant, I think that if somebody goes about using my name to do things that I don't support or I don't know about, I have a right to go to court and ask for. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that I should be able to go to court and insist that that person either stops doing what he or she is doing or compensates me for using my name dragging my name into the mud.
Right.
So that's one thing. But if you continue to keep quiet when these things come up, and just the issue maybe verbal denial, it gives people the impression that maybe you are implicated in a way. I'm not saying that you are, but if you don't do anything about it, some people will be convinced that you are probably aware of what is happening. And that is the dangerous part of it, the worrying part of it.
Are you one of such people?
If it continues, I'll be tempted to think so.
You are tempted to think so.
And especially if it does not take any action. For example, now they have terminated the appointment of the Minister of State. If the Minister of State does not complain, if he accepts it without saying anything, it may mean that yes, he has actually misused the name. So that may be an exoneration of the Vice President. But if this is continued and they don't do anything about those people who are doing that, then definitely people will conclude that maybe it's true. That's why they are keeping quiet. But for now, it's too early to conclude that. But I'm just saying that if such things continue, and you do nothing against those who are using the name for such purpose, then you are giving the impression to the public that, maybe you are aware of this.
When you speak of exonerating himself, he's already come out with a statement, so to speak, on social media, which he's put out. He stated categorically, I don't know anything about this, and my integrity is very dear to me. What else then? And I want a stretch of this because time and again we hear of such situations, but it appears even legally speaking, there's not much that can be done. Even post the presidency, we know the restrictions on tackling a former president on some of these issues. So is it high time, for example, what would you like to see by the stretch of exonerating himself? What processes? And then should we get to the point where maybe we tweak what our laws say about such instances and maybe calling such powers that be to order, ensuring that there is accountability to probe the matter? What do we do?
You see, I've said that I'm not a lawyer, but I think that it should be possible for you to go to court on this matter. That you are using my name for criminal activity. I don't know. Is it not possible for me to go to court and insist that something happens against you because you are using my name for criminal activity? And if you have that privilege and you don't take advantage of it, what impression are you creating out there? It's not enough to just come out with a statement and say, you are not aware of it. Yes, some people believe you, others may not believe you. What do you do after that? And in this case, you say, yes, well, the person's appointment has been terminated, which is to confirm that, yes, you are actually not aware of what's happening. That's fine. But I'm saying that if such things continue and nothing happens to the individuals involved, definitely it will create an impression out there that maybe there is a basis for what the people are saying.
Hold for me briefly. I'll come right back to you. Because you make that point, and because you're not a lawyer, let me bring in Bobby. On the legal spectrum, well, it appears we've lost Bobby Banton. I would have wanted to find out what on the legal spectrum can be done to clear himself, clear his name, basically, as the vice president. But now we've got to the point where, indeed, this matter has been taken up and it's been forwarded to the special prosecutor. Mr. Azim, what would be your expectations as far as the special prosecutor is concerned?
No, I haven't got that question, but...
So this matter, per the notice, the release we got from the presidency, mentions that the case has been forwarded to the special prosecutor. And I'm asking, what would be your expectations? First of all, is it the right place for this to be taken to, the special prosecutor's office? And what would be your expectations in terms of this case, Charles Edu Boahen?
Again, I've said I'm not a lawyer, but it will be an issue. Is it corruption or corruption related? Or is it a criminal act? If it's corruption and corruption related, it will be the Office of Special Prosecutor. But if it's any other criminal act, I think that it will be the wrong place to send it for investigation. And also, as for the expectation, it normally would depend on the government side.
Okay.
Whether it is an issue that the government has an interest in it going in a particular direction or the government is neutral. And in most cases, governments are not neutral in this case because when an individual of a political party is found guilty of corruption,
right,
the other side will jump to the conclusion that we said your party is corrupt or the government is corrupt. This confirms it. And so because of that, various governments have always had a tendency to protect and shield their appointees when they are accused of corruption. And so that makes the work of the investigators very difficult. Because even if the government sometimes does not directly say that, look, I'm interested in this case, I expect it to go in this direction, you, the appointee, by virtue of the method by which you have been appointed, probably handpicked and offered the position, you are likely to always think, what will I do to please the government of the day? And that is the problem with the way our appointments are made to some of these autonomous or semi-autonomous institutions. All the appointing powers are vested in the president. And the president, by implication, is also influenced by his party hierarchy in this appointment. And that is a dent in our efforts at fighting corruption in this country.
Just to conclude the conversation with you before I let go of you, sir, there's also that bit about the committee tasked to look into the minorities' motion of censure against Ken Ofori-Atta. That's on the other end. That ad hoc committee was put together by the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin. What would be your expectations? First of all, do you agree with the Speaker when he says this matter must be exhausted in this manner when it comes to the motion of censure? And what would your expectations be?
Well, I agree with the Speaker because specific allegations have been made against the Minister of Finance that warrant, or based on which they are calling for its removal. And so it's important that he's given a chance to defend himself. Yes, we know the economic problems are there, the allegations have been made. But we are in a democracy, and it's only fair that you give him a chance to respond to those allegations or accusations. Now, with regards to the expectation from the investigation, it is a bipartisan committee. And from the fact that a majority of the NPP MPs are also calling for its removal, I would expect that the recommendation will be for its removal.
Right.
And I even think that if I were the Minister of Finance, if I were the President, I would have advised the Minister of Finance to resign, to avoid dragging his party MPs through all this mess. I mean, there's not one person. If Minister of Finance should drop dead today, does it mean the country will collapse? Why can't the government sacrifice just one person for the sake of this country?
Thank you, Mr. Azim, for joining the conversation. Mr. Vitus Azim is an anti-graft campaigner. He joined us for this conversation. Let's now bring in Dr. Vic Benuyena. He is Professor of Labor Market Studies and Human Resources at the University of Birmingham. And he actually is, interestingly, in the United Arab Emirates, where these tend to happen, where this entire initiative also took place. Doc, a very good morning to you. I don't know whether it's morning where you find yourself, but thank you for joining the conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. It is afternoon, which is not so bad for where I am. I will start off, first of all, to clarify that, as I understand, this is not something to do with UAE government. It was an investigative journalism which was meant to uncover the extent of corruption with this particular individual minister. So I'm not necessarily trying to protect UAE government here. I do not believe that the UAE government will ever do something like that. However, what has been highlighted in this particular scenario is that our governments in Africa, particularly Ghana, are failing. They are failing because the type of democracy which we are kind of practicing is not appropriate for the country's needs. I believe that the size of government is way too large, and there has to be a reason why the president continued to appoint several ministers, including this Minister of State. Why not just a few ministries in the country? But what is even more important is that had this not been uncovered, this minister would continue to be at post. And if he had continued to be at post, the tendencies of collecting bribes from different sources that you and I cannot mention right now would be enormous. And it highlights the extent of corruption among all sort of government institutions in the country. I will not suggest that NDC government ministers would have been better in dealing with these sort of issues. I will not excuse any party in Ghana, but my concern is this, that why do we wait all the while until something like this happens before we put an intervention in place?
But Doc, yes, you talk about interventions, but the point to be made is, unless you uncover some of this rot, so to speak, or unless there are other egregious accusations leveled against a Minister of State, if they are performing, you would leave them at post. In this instance, we have an issue that has come up that borders on peddling influence, among other things. Before that, there had been, calls to sack both him and the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, for other reasons, for non-performance. So I'm not too clear what you mean by some mechanisms put in place. Can you expand on that?
Well, who polices the government? Who is? I know we have the judiciary, we have the legislature, then we have the presidential organ. But the problem is, who polices these people? So when I talk about intervention, there has to be an oversight committee within the Ghanaian government apparatus, or kind of outside the governing apparatus, to be able to check some of these things. We shouldn't really wait until it has occurred. I mean, is there a process to check the kind of kickbacks that have been received? Is there a process to make public the accounts of these government ministers so that we know? That is the case in some of the countries. I know Donald Trump has refused to turning his tax returns, but that's far from the point. In Africa, we have endemic problems. And when we have serious problems, we have to tackle those serious problems with seriousness. Now, the question is, what will a reasonable person do? As far as ethics is concerned, what will a reasonable person do when they are tempted in this sort of situation? Will they say no, or will they say yes? And in this particular case, he has said yes. And how many times has he said yes in the past? And how many times have the government officials said yes to kickbacks and that sort of thing in the past? So if there is no apparatus in the system to check some of these practices, we will only have to rely on ANAS or one of those investigative journalists to uncover these things. And quick
intervention. So you talk about this other committee or body. I know you're thinking of some other establishment to deal with these matters, but we have the judiciary. In fact, when you look at the three arms of government, the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, they are meant to be, if you go back to the Baron de Montesquieu and the rest, they are meant to be checks on one another. That's the first point. The second point is, beyond all of these, we have the Office of the Special Prosecutor, and the matter has been referred to the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Is there something else then that we should be doing? Whether maybe in investigating these matters to check on ministers, or post the fact to ensure that there is accountability?
Well, the issue is far from that. The issue is who appoints all these people. They all know each other. So you've made a point very clear, but who appoints the prosecutors? Who appoints the judiciary? Who appoints the people meant to be policing each other? That's where the corruption begins. If the relations, government's relations are being appointed to these positions, then they will never be able to put in place proper checks. So that in itself is a big problem. I know you are thinking, what else can we do to rectify this situation? And in my view, both parties, the NDC and the NPP, are equally the same in how they deal with these sort of issues within the country. So, I mean, why can't we refuse to accept a person who has been appointed based on nepotism? You know, they know someone who is a relative to somebody, or they've done business before, or because of the kind of relationship they've had in school, therefore they get appointed to positions. So I know it's a very dicey issue, but we have to start from somewhere. Now, I have to make a very important point. I'm not sure if you're still with me. Sometimes we tend to dwell too much on the problems and not focusing on the solution per se. So moving forward from this, without just stating that sometimes the media is overly interested in just discussing the problems, and moving forward is normally not addressed by the media. What else can we do to prevent some of these issues from happening? What else can we do to highlight some of the corrupt practices within the government?
Well, interesting dynamics you make mention of. There's also the issue, just to cap off the conversation, when it comes to Parliament, and another issue that has been raised on the other side has to do with Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Now there seems to be some consensus that he must go, but how he goes appears to be the problem. The minority wanted to, put forward a motion of censure. The majority says that is not the way to go, but they agree that the finance minister must go. Now a committee has been set up to look into the matter, in a way to give a fair hearing to Ken Ofori-Atta, who, per what most people are saying, has lost that moral credibility to be in office. What is your reaction to that?
First, I would like to state that I'm not an expert in politics, neither I'm not an expert in some of the things that are taking place in Ghana. However, I have asked the question before, what will a reasonable person do when they are faced with certain situations, particularly if they are holding a public office? Now, in terms of competence of Ofori-Atta, I have very minimal information on that. However, with the issues in Ghana, with the economic crisis in Ghana, anyone who is unable to deal with those issues heads on doesn't deserve to be in that position. Now, I teach business, broadly speaking. Now, I train students to be ethical in how they do things after graduation. I will not give a job to someone who demonstrates incompetence. So why should we give a job to someone who oversees the overall country's economic position? Why should we continue to give them the position when they are underperforming? It's a critical question that everyone has to grapple with. If he is not performing well, why is he holding the country to not ransom, but why is he not letting someone else get into the job and do it much better than he is doing? I have listened to the gentleman a few times, and my perception of him is he might be very, very intelligent, but being intelligent doesn't mean you are capable of handling a position that he's currently occupying. And I think it's about time that serious problems are dealt with the kind of seriousness that it deserves, without political leaders trying to defend each other by trying to tell the public that, oh, well, the individual is great, and using qualitative words to describe the abilities of those individuals. We need to see what they are capable of doing in terms of physical numbers. We need to see the translation of that, ability in terms of the lives of individuals, the poor people in Ghana on the streets of Accra and other parts of Ghana. They need to feel that there is an economic solution to their problem. They shouldn't be told by leaders of the country that it's okay, everything is okay. Words don't mean anything when there is an economic crisis.
All right. Doc, we're grateful for your time. Dr. Vic Benuyena joined the conversation. He is Professor of Labor Market Studies and Human Resources at the University of Birmingham. Earlier, we had Vitus Azim, an anti-graft campaigner, and Bobby Banson, a lawyer.